David Johnson and Peggy Finnegan.
1990, a year full of big news stories both here at home and around the world.
Over the next hour, we'll take a look back at many of those events and the people affected by what happened.
Our Channel 11 news files contain many memorable moments from the past year.
And we'll begin our review now with the first 3 months of 1990.
If you had to sum up January, February, and March in one word, that word would be change. Change in Pittsburgh politics, not only for the people who run City Hall, but for the residents they serve. Change in government leadership, both in the country of Panama and in the District of Columbia. And tragic change for several Pittsburgh area families, the result of some terrible fires. Let's look back now at the first 3 months of 1990. 1990 starts with a roundup on the rivers around our area of barges ripped away from their moorings by chunks of ice, like here at the Maxwell Lock and Dam.
Do solemnly swear that you will support the Constitution of the United States.
On January 2nd, a historic moment in Pittsburgh politics, as Sophie Masloff becomes the city's first elected woman mayor. 5 new members of City Council, which is now elected by district, are also sworn in. The former City Council President Ben Woods gets 8 years in jail for his conviction on racketeering and extortion charges. Another disgraced politician, Washington, D.C. Mayor Marion Barry, is videotaped by the FBI smoking crack in a Washington hotel room. Barry is later convicted of 1 count of cocaine possession.
Noriega probably in the middle, not under arrest at this point, walking to a helicopter which was waiting to take him to nearby Howard Air Force Base.
As NBC's Dan Molina reports live on Channel 11 News Night Beat on the night of January the 3rd, Panama strongman Manuel Noriega leaves Panama for a U.S. jail cell. He remains jailed, awaiting trial. February begins as it always does, as Punxsutawney Phil fails to see his shadow, forecasting the fact that spring is right around the corner.
How you doing? Okay.
For the first time since the Beatles concert in 1964, Paul McCartney plays at the Civic Arena to a sold-out crowd.
I would say that this verdict in this particular case shows that we put on a good case. That's the only message that we intended to send.
Local radio newscaster Liz Randolph receives a Valentine's Day present as a jury awards her nearly $700,000 in her defamation suit. Randolph accuses disc jockeys Jim Quinn and Banana Don Jefferson, along with radio station WBZZ, of depicting her as sexually promiscuous. Teachers throughout West Virginia walk off the job. The issue is money, as they claim pay in the state is $8,000 less than the national average. In Pittsburgh, doctors at Children's Hospital operate again on Stormy Jones. The only survivor of a heart-liver transplant has a second liver transplant and returns home to Texas. On the 5-year anniversary of Cherry Mahan's disappearance, state police in Butler say her case remains open. An artist's conception shows what Cherry might look like today. At the end of 1990, she remains missing.
They were a nice family. They didn't bother me, you know. Everybody in town liked them people.
4 members of an Arcadia, Indiana County family die in a fire. Later, 2 men are convicted of setting that blaze. 1 is a family member.
Gosh, already. He was a good friend of mine. And, you know, 1 minute he's here, 1 minute he's gone. I miss him.
March begins with another arson. 5 children die and 1 adult die in this Turtle Creek fire. The children were attending a birthday sleepover. Paul Wright was arrested and in late December was acquitted of the charges of setting the blaze.
I am proud to be gay. There is no need to debate acceptance because I have already waded through society's slimy attempt to deny me of my self-respect.
The highly controversial gay rights bill provokes some stormy Pittsburgh City Council meetings. The bill passes after the debate ends.
He's running in. He's running. See him going in?
Pittsburgh police crack down on crack during this raid. 2 men take off. Inside this house, police find a woman who says her home was used as a crack house, against her will.
All right, here we go. You ready?
And Vice President Dan Quayle stops in the Pittsburgh area, where he has a beer at a Monroeville bar. Earlier, he toured a computer software firm. President Bush did not make a visit to the Channel 11 viewing area in 1990. The closest he came to this part of the country was Akron when he campaigned for the next governor of Ohio, George Voinovich. There were some significant moments in sports over the January, February, and March, like the NHL All-Star Game here in Pittsburgh and the baseball lockout. Sam Nover will wrap up the sports year later in this special report.
Well, David, another big event in the first 3 months of 1990 took dozens of Byzantine Catholics from our area on a pilgrimage halfway around the world. They flew to Czechoslovakia to witness the installation of a new bishop, an event made possible by the end of communist control in Eastern Europe. Channel 11 News reporter Kelly Mitchell and photographer Mark Johnston accompanied the delegation to capture their visit to this brave new world. Here's a look back at their trip.
Fine.
Have a good trip.
Thank you. It was with much anticipation that a group of Pittsburgh Byzantine Catholics boarded a plane bound for the homeland of their ancestors. What awaited them on the other end was truly beyond their wildest dreams.
Now we are about 1,000 above the sea level.
It was a trip of sightseeing and shopping in a country that's just beginning to flex its economic muscle. It was also a trip of tearful family reunions conducted in homes that, up until now, were denied Western visitors.
You have to come home.
I have to come home. I like to go home.
You have to come home, Aunt. Oh, you have to come home. Please come home with me.
But more than anything, it was a trip of religious firsts, as the Pittsburgh clergy became the first to conduct a Greek Rite Catholic liturgy in a church seized by the Russian Orthodox over 40 years ago. Our Pittsburgh group became part of history once again by participating in a 5-hour ceremony elevating Jan Hirke to bishop. Hirke, who 26 years before had been imprisoned for his religious beliefs, was ordained in a communist-constructed facility built to replace religion with sports. But it was a trip to Uzhhorod in the Soviet Ukraine that brought the most surprises when nearly 1,000 people greeted the Pittsburgh Byzantines upon their arrival. Never before had so many dared to assemble openly as Catholics, quite a bold show of religious faith by the members of this brave new world. Kelly Mitchell, Channel 11 News.
One of the people with the group who made the visit to Czechoslovakia has been promoted by the church. Uniontown native Thomas Dolanai is now the Archbishop of the Pittsburgh Byzantine Catholic Diocese. He received that honor over the summer.
Peggy, the last day of March and the first few days of April 1990 were both memorable and scary for the residents of communities along the Allegheny River. That's when the Buckeye oil pipeline broke open. The spill resulted in a smelly mess, one which killed fish, threatened drinking water supplies, and created tense moments for both residents and cleanup crews. A team of Channel 11 News reporters was on the scene of the spill as it happened. Our Jenny Ferguson takes us back to visit that hectic, scary time.
It's March 31st, 1990, and a river community called Freeport wakes up to find 55,000 gallons of a gasoline fuel oil mix snaking its way down the Allegheny. The massive spill happened about 4 miles north of Freeport when a landslide ruptured a pipeline owned by the Buckeye Pipeline Company. The disaster brought immediate denials from Buckeye and angry words from Freeport leaders.
Very upset. I'm upset to the point that Freeport Borough was never officially notified.
I was informed that proper notifications were made to the federal agencies and the state agencies.
You want to hook the rest of them boom in line for us?
While officials pointed fingers, cleanup crews began the round-the-clock job of sopping up this oily mess, and nearby residents began feeling its effects.
More step. One more step.
In Freeport, this 6-story elderly high-rise was quickly evacuated when residents smelled petroleum fumes coming from the spill. 76-year-old Wanda Abbott remembers firefighters beating on her door saying, "Get out."
Fireman said, "Now," he said, "that we're evacuating the building. Now," he said, "any medication that you have to have, you take with you." I said, "Well, how long is it going to be?" He said, "We don't know." As soon as they opened the door, I could smell the fumes in the hall.
Were they pretty strong?
Yes, they were strong.
Wanda Abbott spent the next few days with family, while some of her elderly neighbors, like Helen Kelly, were put up at nearby hotels and schools.
I don't like to leave it. I'd like to stay there, like everybody else would like to do.
Over the next few days, Governor Casey would declare a state of emergency as the oil slick moved further downriver, threatening the drinking water of nearly 1 million people, killing fish and other wildlife. Many river communities shut down businesses, schools, and their water intake valves, leaving some areas bone dry. Meantime, thousands of people got this water conservation order from the State Department of Environmental Resources.
If you can avoid taking the baths, if you can avoid using the water, it would be good until we know the full extent of any contamination of the water system.
That meant cities like Natrona Heights, Brackenridge, and Harrison Township were entirely dependent on these water buffaloes, where residents went to fill up day and night. Jeanette Pourva remembers the water shortage affected her at home and work.
We had to fill up big 55-gallon drums with water and take containers to flush the toilets and whatnot. Nothing worked right. For the people who couldn't shower or couldn't wash for days, it was terrible.
Manning those water buffaloes and setting up portable toilets was nonstop work for Harrison Hills volunteer firefighter John Gillette. He remembers the Buckeye oil spill as a crisis that brought communities closer together and taught emergency crews some valuable lessons.
It's something now that you have to look at happening again and be able to be prepared for. And this will always stick in the back of everybody's mind, especially a lot of the guys that were there would go to work and come back in the evening and spend all night there.
As the oil slick moved past those smaller Allegheny River communities and headed toward Pittsburgh, there were more tense moments. Pittsburgh residents were voluntarily asked to conserve water while crews bombarded the spill with cleansing chemicals. As a result, Pittsburgh never had to stop pumping from the river. The spill floated past with no drinking water contamination. By April 4th, nearly 4 days after it began, the Buckeye Pipeline spill was officially declared over. One visible reminder, though, was this claims office, still open for business at a Natrona area mall. Several hundred people filed claims against Buckeye. Settlements cost the company $500,000.
Hard to believe this peaceful stretch of river was ever the scene of a huge oil spill, one that threatened the drinking water of nearly 1 million people. But the folks who coped with the Buckeye oil spill say they will never forget those dramatic days. In Freeport, Jenny Ferguson, Channel 11 News.
The Buckeye Pipeline spill was the first of the major stories to break over April, May, and June.
As we take a look back now at what happened over that 3-month span, we find stories of 3 types: stories of crime, sadness, and surprise.
Camera, I'm gonna kick.
What's your name? Do you have a name?
Yeah, my name. I'm gonna tell you my name.
The man known as Jedi is arrested for a series of convenience store holdups. 27-year-old Alan Bonneau of East Liberty confesses to many of the more than 20 robberies over a 2-week crime spree. A sad note from Erie. Longtime Mayor Louis Tullio dies. He was 73 years old. Tullio suffered from amyloidosis, the same disease which killed Pittsburgh Mayor Caligiuri in 1988. In Westmoreland County, Sony makes it official. The company will move into the old Volkswagen plant near New Stanton. Sony will make picture tubes here. 1,000 people will be hired.
I was mostly concerned that the houses that were nearby would catch on fire and people might be killed or burned or injured.
And the community of Craigsville, Armstrong County is partially evacuated as a derailment causes an explosion, then fire of some tanker cars loaded with crude oil. The 20th anniversary of Kent State is marked. 4 students were shot and killed there in 1970 by the National Guard during a Vietnam War protest. USX shareholders hear Carl Icahn's proposal to separate the steel division from other USX interests. The shareholders vote the proposal down. A hot topic of the May primary elections is the life of Representative Austin Murphy. His opponent, William Nicolella, reveals that Murphy has a son with a woman other than his wife. Murphy wins overwhelmingly despite the report. A close call for Barbara Hafer. She narrowly defeats Peg Luksic for the Republican nomination for Pennsylvania governor. Governor Casey has no trouble winning the Democratic nomination. Pittsburgh gets a new police chief as Mayor DeRoy, a lifelong friend of Mayor Masloff, is sworn in as police chief. DeRoy has served the city for 33 years.
Can't forget, won't regret.
May is a sad month in the entertainment world. Sammy Davis Jr. loses his battle with cancer. On the same day, we're shocked by the news of Jim Henson's death. The Muppet creator dies suddenly, and actress Jill Ireland loses her battle with cancer. In Washington, President Bush and Soviet leader Gorbachev meet to discuss the situation in Europe and take steps to try and end the Cold War. The beginning of June brings an end to the controversy at the Arts Festival surrounding the hunky steelworker statue.
If this, in fact, is uncomfortable and bothersome or painful to some people, even if it is a minority, then it's not right, and I think, we should remove it.
Another entertainment giant dies. Actor Rex Harrison, the star of My Fair Lady, dies in New York City.
A rock came down out of the sky, bounced off of our hood, and smashed through the windshield and sprayed glass all over our whole car.
Pittsburgh commuters find driving hazardous on the Parkway East as parts of the Greenfield Bridge tumble down, injuring one person, damaging at least 20 vehicles. Another transportation headache, the West End Bridge is closed for construction. This bridge won't reopen until late in 1991. In Beaver County, a 39-year-old mother of 4 is gunned down in a store robbery. Carolyn Bradley's killer has not been found. And in New York, 3 teenagers go on trial for the beating and rape of an Upper St. Clair native known only as the Central Park Jogger. The trio is convicted. In December, 2 other teens are also convicted. 1 more awaits trial.
This is Katanning Street where it meets Route 8, and look how the water is rushing down onto my feet there.
And on the 14th of June, torrential rains cause flooding all around our area. Etna is still suffering the impact of that night of flooding.
While the city streets are cleaned up now, the bills left over from that cleanup remain, forcing borough government to cut back on services, including the number of police on patrol.
A wall of water rages through Shadyside, Ohio. We'll take a look back at those days of destruction. Plus, we'll see how the community is fighting back today when this Channel 11 News special report continues.
For drastic price reductions, don't miss Sun's gigantic year-end sale. Save on floor samples, open stock, odds and ends, prior year models, plus new items and factory fresh cartons. Scoop up great buys on famous brand TVs, appliances, audio and video equipment, and much more during this big sale. Hundreds of name brand items sold at big reductions. So hurry in for the great year-end sale going on now at your nearest Sun Savings Center.
You asked for more news. That's why Channel 11 News brings you First at 5 with David Johnson and Peggy Finnegan. You asked for more local stories. First at 5 concentrates on news from around the area. You asked for more in-depth coverage. First at 5 goes deeper with the background report, a daily in-depth look at the story of the day. Channel 11 News First at 5 with David Johnson and Peggy Finnegan. More news, more local stories, more in-depth coverage. Channel 11 News First at 5, the only 5 p.m. newscast in town.
A special Channel 11 Nova one-on-one with quarterback great Joe Namath. Get some one-on-one insight into Broadway Joe's legendary playmaking, both on and off the field.
We're creatures of habit, and it's more difficult to break a bad habit than establish a good one.
And find out why growing up in Beaver Falls helped him win the Super Bowl.
It was a great place to be brought up, and the work ethic, of course, I think, is carried over.
Catch a special Nova one-on-one with Joe Namath tomorrow at noon, only on WPXI TV. Channel 11, your Steelers station, brings you Steelers 90. Host John Fedko will show you what to expect when the Steelers take the field. And co-host Mark Malone outlines the plays to look for. More people turn to Channel 11 for Steelers coverage than any other station in town. Preview the Steelers-Oilers game tomorrow night at 7:30 on Steelers 90, only on Channel 11.
I have his jumpsuit at home in my Ellis room.
They're fanatical fans.
I'm just like every one of you.
On the next Geraldo.
Geraldo, Monday at 9, followed by Joan Rivers.
We continue our Channel 11 News special report now with a look back at 1990's most devastating story in our area, the floods which hit Shadyside, Ohio.
While we were covering the flash floods here in the Pittsburgh area, we learned of the destruction in and around Shadyside that night of June the 15th. For the next few weeks, our Channel 11 News crews found stories not only of despair and sadness, but also stories of heroism and hope in Shadyside. And our Bill Martin was part of our team on that story. He shows us what it's like in Shadyside then and now.
I got plenty of clothes.
Over.
"22 precious, irreplaceable lives gone, swept away by the raging floodwaters of Ouija Creek. 8 were children, all under 10 years of age. Loss of life and property is overwhelming." Today, Ouija Creek's back within its banks, but the memories are still clear and painful for the folks living along the water, like Pat Ferrier, who lost neighbors and friends.
Sure, it ain't gonna be the same, you know. I lost a couple of good friends up here.
Think about them often?
Yes, I do. Every time I walk up the hill.
What do you think about?
Well, I just miss seeing him. Mr. Moore, I see him every morning. Now I don't see him no more.
But he thinks about him every day on these walks. The volunteers are still in and around Shadyside. Doug Coop and friends are Mennonites from Canada, farmers by trade, but today they're builders.
There's people here that need help, and I guess love of God tells me to go out and help the people.
What Mother Nature has swept away, the people here are fighting to put back. Erasing memories of their old homes, the frightening memories, and building new ones. Julia Kulazenka, whose home was battered but standing after the flood, says the process, though, is slow.
All the brush, all the bushes and small trees that were there that hid the creek. You couldn't see the water. Now it's an open view right down to it, and everything echoes. You hear everything. So it is a little bit, yeah, you think a little bit more about the high water coming up now. But I'm sure that this was a once in a lifetime, once in 2 lifetimes, that I'll probably never ever see this again.
No one here wants to.
It's hard to believe, looking at Ouija Creek, that it did cause so much damage and pain. And while it's pretty much back to being a quiet place to visit, well, the people around here, they'll never be able to look at Ouija Creek the same again. In Shadyside, Bill Martin, Channel 11 News.
There were a number of severe weather situations around our area and across the country in 1990. Later in this special report, our Dennis Bowman will take a closer look at the year weather-wise.
The next 3 months of 1990 included some news that will impact all of us for some time. Included in those stories, changes on the Supreme Court and the beginning of the crisis in the Middle East. Let's take a look now at the months of July, August, and September. July begins with a fire at Temple Road of Sholem in Oakland. The temple was being renovated. A construction worker later lost his life in an accident here. The temple renovations were completed. Fireworks on the 3rd of July. Pittsburgh moves its Independence Day celebration to save on police overtime. Another politician heads to jail as former West Virginia Governor Arch Moore is sentenced to over 5 years for fraud, extortion, and other charges. Pittsburgh legend Art Rooney Sr.'s name comes up during the trial of West Virginia racketeer Paul Hankish. Hankish says the late Steeler owner bet big money on football. The Rooney family says there's no truth to the charges. On July 21st, longtime Supreme Court Justice William Brennan steps down. Just 2 days later, President Bush nominates New Hampshire Judge David Souter to replace Brennan. The Senate confirms Souter in the fall. And Pittsburgh loses a television pioneer July 25th. Paul Shannon dies after a long illness. Shannon is best known for hosting the children's show Adventure Time.
I heard some bad news about some dead bodies in Kuwait.
August begins with word from the Middle East that Iraq has invaded Kuwait. Here at home, just a day after the invasion, experts predict a jump in gasoline prices. At the time, regular was selling for $1 a gallon.
I was wet already before the race, so I'll be wet afterwards.
On August 5th, the Three Rivers Regatta, co-sponsored by WPXI, is underway with some soggy weather. Crowds are smaller as a result. On August 14th, there's tragedy at the Greater Pittsburgh Airport's midfield terminal construction project. One worker is killed, another injured when support beams collapse. The site is shut down for inspection. After construction begins again, another worker dies when a crane collapses. The school year begins in many western Pennsylvania districts, but students in 9 districts are kept out of classes by strikes. By the end of the year, all disputes are settled except in the Neshannock district, where selective strikes continue.
He wanted the police to shoot him, and we refused to do that.
On September 7th, 30-year-old Paul Fisher climbs to the top of the Moorhead Towers apartment building in Oakland and fires random shots into the air. Fisher spends the afternoon brandishing his guns while police negotiate his surrender. Fisher gave police 2 of his guns, but used a third to kill himself. His body plunged to the ground.
Quote is a direct quote from it, and also, I just wanted the police to kill me is also a direct quote.
A new era begins in Pennsylvania as a state law takes effect requiring recycling. Pittsburgh begins a one-bag recycling program. Other communities follow suit in the effort. This quarter of 1990 marked the beginning of the major trial of the year,
as 9 members of the Western Pennsylvania Mafia went on trial in federal court.
All 9 defendants were eventually convicted of 23 years of organized crime activities. Testimony included sometimes shocking and gruesome statements. Our Jenny Ferguson covered the entire 2.5-month-long trial. She looks back at the trial now, the verdict, and what's happened since.
It's just not fair. I just feel they were set up, and that's all I can say.
Michael Porter still can't believe the jury's verdict. He's the son of convicted mobster Chucky Porter. After deliberating nearly 4 straight days, this 8-man, 4-woman jury found Porter and 9 others guilty of 2 decades of mob activity involving illegal drugs, gambling, and loan sharking. U.S. Attorney Tom Corbett says his prosecutors proved that Penn Hills residents Porter and Lou Rucci answer only to reputed Western Pennsylvania mob boss Mike Genovese.
This conviction of these individuals, all individuals involved, effectively severs the body from the head of La Cosa Nostra here in the Western District of Pennsylvania.
Genovese was not on trial, but then Corbett says this investigation is not yet over either. Jurors apparently did not believe Chucky Porter when he testified in his own defense, choosing instead to believe the nearly 70 prosecution witnesses, some of them convicted murderers and drug dealers, testifying in exchange for lesser sentences. Harold Gondelman is one of Chucky Porter's 2 attorneys. He called the government's case a fairy tale and its star witness a liar.
I don't think the findings are sustained by the evidence, Andy. They're incredible. I can't believe a 10-time murder. That's called reasonable doubt, or reason to doubt.
In exchange for his testimony, one major mob trial witness has already walked out of prison a free man. But the final chapter in this story won't be written until late January, when the mobsters return to federal court for their sentencing. All face possible life prison terms, and Chucky Porter will be the first to get his punishment. Downtown at federal court, Jenny Ferguson, Channel 11 News. The news media became part of the mob trial story. Portions of some confidential FBI documents detailing conversations with informants were mailed anonymously to the media. Federal attorneys subpoenaed those documents, but after a local newspaper turned over its copy, the demand was dropped.
Now on to the final 3 months of 1990. Among the top stories there were some big medical concerns, tributes, and a local election shocker. Let's look back now at October, November, and December. On Sunday, October 7th, Pittsburgh hails the chief. A bronze statue of Art Rooney Sr. is unveiled at Three River Stadium during a live Channel 11 News special. The statue was made possible by the contributions of Mr. Rooney's many admirers. The statue was crafted by Carrick native Raymond Caskey. Another late leader of Pittsburgh is honored as a statue of Mayor Richard Caligiuri is unveiled on the steps of the city-county building.
Well, I think it couldn't have been for a better man. Paying tribute to him and the lot he done for our neighborhood.
In Washington County, residents are evacuated, the result of a fire at the Matthews mine.
My mom didn't know what to think. I said, Mom, we're going to Grandma's.
The mine is now sealed off. Hundreds of miners are out of work, and the fire still burns underground.
Election night brings a surprise as Republican Rick Santorum defeats Democratic incumbent Doug Walgren in the 18th Congressional District. In his live concession speech that night, Walgren remembers the good times.
I have been so proud of what we have been able to do for other people through these years, and it is a memory that I will keep with me as one of the most valuable experiences that I have had.
Governor Bob Casey easily wins a second term. Republican challenger Barbara Hafer wishes him the best.
I just talked to Bob Casey and wished him well. He's going to have a difficult 4 years. He said, I lost a few times myself. I know what it's like. But let me just tell you, we're going to all work together for a better Pennsylvania.
In medical news, fear for those using Indocin eye drops. The drops made at Heber's Pharmacy in Oakland are found to be contaminated with a bacteria. 2 people lose their eyes. Lawsuits are pending. A government investigation continues. On November 11th, Stormy Jones, the world's first heart-liver transplant patient, dies. Stormy returned to Children's Hospital just the night before. She died from organ rejection. She was just 13 years old.
Some people get burned out. Other people only develop a stronger desire to make things better. Maybe I hope I fall in the latter category.
Stormy Jones's first transplant surgeon, Dr. Thomas Starzl, announces in early December he'll no longer be actively involved in transplant surgery. Instead, he'll be focusing on research. Earlier in the year, Dr. Starzl was hospitalized for heart trouble.
I heard a loud boom, and my daughter said, "What was that?" And I said, "I don't know, probably a truck just stopping." And then I saw like this cloud of dust and like these bricks or something falling, and a man was running back, and he said, "The tunnel collapsed, the tunnel collapsed."
Commuters using the Liberty tunnels on December 4th thought that's what was happening. But actually, some electrical lines fell down from the top of the outbound tunnel. It was feared that the tunnel could be closed for an extended period of time. But just over 24 hours later, crews made some temporary repairs, which allowed traffic to flow at a normal pace. PennDOT is making permanent repairs to the outbound Liberty Tunnel by closing it overnight, allowing crews inside.
Just days after the tunnel trouble, PennDOT marked a milestone by reopening an improved section of Route 28, a highway which used to be known as the Death Stretch.
A Pittsburgh-bound plane is involved in a deadly runway collision. We'll review that day in Detroit, plus area men and women involved in Operation Desert Shield when this Channel 11 News special report continues.
Are the Steelers headed for another Super Bowl victory? Watch Channel 11 to catch the playoff-clinching Steelers-Houston game and see if Pittsburgh is on the road to Super Bowl 25. First, preview the game on a primetime Steelers 90 tomorrow night at 7:30. Followed by the Steelers-Houston Showdown, only on WPXI TV.
I had a fellow come out. He said, "How about coming up and giving us a hand?" So I went up to the second floor where the party was at, and he and I both held on to their arms and got them down. I got them into the back seat of the cab. I actually would hate to think what would have happened to them if they had tried to drive their car.
Again this year, Channel 11 is offering you a free ride home on New Year's Eve.
Just call 333-WPXI to take a taxi, not a life.
It's late. You've been working hard all day. And now it's time to play. The wheel is gonna get ya. 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 Wheels on! The wheel is gonna get ya. The wheel is gonna get ya.
Wheel of Fortune, Monday at 7:30, here on Channel 11.
Next time on The Judge.
Did you steal your daughter's story when you wrote your film?
I've never ripped off anyone.
Monday at 4:30, followed by First at 5.
63 degrees, rainy, mild tomorrow, a high of 60. Freezing rain may end as flurries tomorrow. We'll have a low near 28. News coming up in 25 minutes.
As we near the end of 1990, there are some stories where the ending may not be resolved until the new year.
One such story is the investigation into the collision of Flight 1482. That's the Northwest Airlines plane which collided with another plane at Detroit's Metropolitan Airport. Our Margaret Shortridge, who was on the scene of that disaster, reviews what happened.
A grisly sight. This is what's left of Northwest Flight 1482, gutted and smoldering on the ground at Detroit's Metropolitan Airport. A collision caused this Pittsburgh-bound jet to burst into flames, killing many of those people on board.
Flight 1482 readied for takeoff at 1:45 p.m. on December 3rd. 39 passengers and 5 crew members on board, the plane bound for Pittsburgh from Detroit Metropolitan Airport. That's when this happened. A Memphis-bound 727 is on runway 21C. Now, when the pilot of the Pittsburgh-bound DC-9 moves his plane onto that same runway, into the path of the oncoming 727, because of the fog, the pilots did not see the other's plane until the very last second. Transcripts show that the Pittsburgh-bound crew told the control tower it was also on 21C. When it did, an alarmed controller said, "You say you're on 21C?" The pilot says, "We believe we are. Not sure." The controller says, "If you're on 21C, exit the runway immediately." The collision then occurs. Among the passengers, John Izzo of Plumboro. His wife, Dolly, called us during our First at 5 newscast that night to tell us that he was all right.
I thought that he was maybe fooling around at first. But then when I realized what had happened, I was just really excited because I was always worried that something like this might happen.
Later that night, John Izzo returned to Pittsburgh, where his son Arik went on with his planned confirmation. But there were Pittsburghers who were not as fortunate. Among the 8 dead was 30-year-old Kinsley Brown, who was trapped in the back of the plane when an emergency latch failed, and 23-year-old Mauro Batiglione of Point Breeze. And survivor Jeff Marshall told us a few days later the collision put new meaning in his life.
You know, I said I believe there was a God, but I said now I really believe even more that there is a God, or at least some guardian angel that's out there to look for people and say, hey, you were meant here for a purpose, and we're not going to take you away.
Margaret Shortridge, Channel 11 News.
The National Transportation Safety Board investigation into what happened continues.
Well, David, as you know, another major continuing story is in the Middle East. It's been a war of words between the United States and Iraq for almost 5 months now. And United States troops, including local men and women, are stationed in the desert of Saudi Arabia, wondering when and if they'll be called to action. Dissatisfied with the way talks between Iraq and Kuwait were going over reducing oil production and raising the price of crude oil, Saddam Hussein decided to invade Kuwait August 2nd.
Well, our mission right now is just to be ready for anything that happens.
U.S. troops were sent to Saudi Arabia by President Bush, beginning what is now called Operation Desert Shield. On September 7th, during our Channel 11 news special called Middle East Crisis, A Report from Home, we heard from some Pittsburgh area soldiers already in Saudi Arabia and their loved ones left behind.
How comfortable or uncomfortable is that?
It's not too bad, really. We train in these things all the time, and let's face it, consider the alternatives of not wearing it.
Well, we're having a hard time with the heat down here. It gets so hot that the dogs can't work in the heat of the afternoon for long periods of time. So whenever we try to go into the gate shacks with them and that, there's a conflict of interest with religious beliefs and that. They say that the dogs slobber a lot like the camels, so that they take that pretty offensive.
I don't know where they're going to be, or when they're going to call, or when they're coming home.
We saw some family reunions here one Saturday morning in September when members of the 911th Reserve Unit from Greater Pitt returned from their tour of duty. President Bush proposed peace talks. Hussein accepted and ordered that all Americans were free to leave. The first flight arrived at Andrews Air Force Base December 10th. Touchdown to freedom for a plane load of passengers. You're looking at live pictures from Andrews Air Force Base. Just yesterday, the passengers were hostages held by the Iraqis. Tonight, they're back on American soil.
Very grateful that he's home, because I was so afraid that he would be hurt in some manner, you know, because it was a very dangerous situation.
One fear from the Middle East crisis, the rising price of gasoline, has now eased somewhat. You'll recall earlier in this special report, we reminded you the price of a gallon of unleaded regular before the Iraqi invasion was about $1 a gallon. Then earlier this month, prices topped off around $1.40 a gallon as the price of crude oil dropped. The average price for a gallon of unleaded regular now stands at $1.25 a gallon. And that price includes a 5-cent a gallon increase in the federal excise tax on gasoline.
We'll, of course, continue to keep you posted on developments surrounding Operation Desert Shield, including any information we receive concerning local men and women who are part of that military effort.
We'll review the big sports stories of 1990, including the Pirates' big year. Plus, Dennis Bowman looks at the year in weather when this Channel 11 News special report continues.
A special Channel 11 Nover one-on-one with quarterback great Joe Namath. Get some one-on-one insight into Broadway Joe's legendary playmaking, both on and off the field.
We're creatures of habit, and it's more difficult to break a bad habit than establish a good one.
And find out why growing up in Beaver Falls helped him win the Super Bowl.
It was a great place to be brought up, and the work ethic, of course, I think, is carried over.
Catch a special Nover one-on-one with Joe Namath tomorrow at noon, only on WPXI TV.
You asked for more news. That's why Channel 11 News brings you First at 5 with David Johnson and Peggy Finnegan. You asked for more local stories. First at 5 concentrates on news from around the area. You asked for more in-depth coverage. First at 5 goes deeper with the background report, a daily in-depth look at the story of the day. Channel 11 News First at 5 with David Johnson and Peggy Finnegan. More news, more local stories, more in-depth coverage. Channel 11 News First at 5, the only 5 p.m. newscast in town.
Jeopardy! Any questions?
Jeopardy! Monday at 7 here on Channel 11.
Just say hello to your mom.
What killed you, boy? You have a lovely way of provoking.
But this is illegal, man. You're not allowed to sell this. This is against the law.
Geraldo. Investigate the possibilities. Geraldo. Monday at 9 here on Channel 11.
Continuing now with our special report reviewing 1990, to say this year has been a big year in sports might be an understatement.
Well, David, it's especially satisfying for the fans and players of the Pittsburgh Pirates, but they're not the only ones sad to see 1990 end. We've seen some high school champions and bowl-bound college teams as well this year. Sam Nover takes a look at the sports year in review.
We begin our look back at 1990 with baseball, where the year began on an ominous note, as big league owners locked the players out of their training camps until a new collective bargaining agreement was signed. Meanwhile, two of the game's most controversial figures suffered falls from grace. All-time hits leader Pete Rose began serving a prison sentence for tax evasion, while Yankees owner George Steinbrenner was barred from having any dealings with his team as a result of his payoff to a shadowy figure named Howard Spira, whom Steinbrenner hired to spy on outfielder Dave Winfield. As for the Pirates, it was a terrific year both on and off the field. The team won the National League Eastern Division title before losing a tough 6-game playoff series to the eventual world champion Cincinnati Reds. Off the field, the Bucks drew in excess of 2 million fans for the first time in team history. And the Bucks cleaned up on the postseason award circuit as well. Jim Leland was named National League Manager of the Year, Barry Bonds the league's most valuable player, and Doug Dravic captured the National League's Cy Young Award. Pro football's year began with the San Francisco 49ers downing the Denver Broncos to capture their third consecutive Super Bowl title and their fourth in the 1980s. The Steelers nearly made it to the AFC Finals after beating Houston on an overtime field goal by Gary Anderson in the wild card playoff game. The Steelers lost to Denver 24-23 in the divisional playoffs. The 1990 season saw some coaching changes on the Steelers. Joe Walton replaced Tom Moore as offensive coordinator, while Dave Brazil replaced Rod Rust as the defensive coordinator. And an impact player named Eric Green was the team's #1 draft choice. The regular season also featured Chuck Noll's 200th win as Steelers head coach, making him only the 5th coach in NFL history to reach that milestone. In college football, both Pitt and West Virginia suffered through disappointing seasons. Pitt's especially tough, since much was expected of new coach Paul Hackett and his team. But Penn State and Joe Paterno continued to roll on, with the Lions earning a national ranking and a trip to the Blockbuster Bowl. In high school football, champions were crowned in 4 WPIAL classes. North Allegheny won the Quad A title and went on to win the state Quad A title as well. Seton LaSalle took the AAA WPIAL crown. Canavan won in AA, while Farrell captured the Class A title. Perry, by the way, took honors in the City League. 1990 saw the NHL All-Star Game come to Pittsburgh for the very first time, and Mario the Magnificent put on quite a show. He scored 4 goals, but Lemieux would go on the shelf shortly after that with a back injury, and the team failed to make the playoffs, losing out in the final game of the season when Buffalo's Uwe Krupp beat Tom Barrasso with this overtime goal. A new management team was put in place for the 1990-91 season. Craig Patrick retained the general manager's post and brought in Badger Bob Johnson to coach the Pens, as well as the legendary Scotty Bowman to become the team's player personnel director. The current season has seen the Pens sputter with Lemieux absent. He is expected back sometime after the first of the year. College basketball had its high and low points in 1990, none lower than the untimely death of Loyola Marymount star Hank Gathers, who collapsed and died during a game in March from a heart ailment. Jerry Tarkanian's Runnin' Rebels from UNLV won the NCAA basketball title. Locally, Pitt and Duquesne suffered through disappointing seasons. Pitt's due in large part to a foot injury that sidelined point guard Sean Miller. Duquesne's to a lack of quality players, which resulted in a 7-22 season for first-year coach John Carroll. The outlook is much brighter for both teams as the 1990-91 season unfolds. Pitt because of Miller's return, Duquesne because of the influx of talented new players such as James Hargrove and Alan Watkins. Robert Morris made the NCAA tournament again in 1989-90, but their future has been clouded as a result of sanctions imposed by the NC2A because of improper loans to a player. This is Sam Nova reporting for Channel 11 News.
The Pirates will try to prove that they can be winners again in 1991. Their spring training camp opens in February.
Well, Peggy, those teams playing outdoor sports found the weather to be pretty mild in 1990, but there were a number of occasions where Mother Nature was not very kind to us this year. As we detailed earlier in this special report, we had some terrible disasters, the result of heavy rains here in our area. Our Dennis Bowman takes a look at the year in weather, not only here at home, but around the country.
1990 will be remembered as a rather tame year in Pittsburgh where the weather is concerned. It was a mild winter followed by a cool spring and summer, and while snowfall was way down, just 28.4 inches of seasonal snow compared with a normal of 45 inches, there certainly was plenty of precipitation to talk about. As a matter of fact, we finished the year a whopping 11 inches above normal on rainfall, thanks to a very wet May, June, and July, during which 17 inches of rain fell in Pittsburgh, and the 5th wettest September in Pittsburgh history, which featured more than twice the normal rain for the month. While severe weather was conspicuously absent during the year, there were, of course, exceptions in the area. The June disaster in nearby Shadyside, Ohio, was prompted by 7 inches of rain that fell in 2 hours. The same storm caused flooding in the North Hills, with Shaler and Etna residents having to rise to the occasion once again. A vigorous lightning display in July decimated these cattle huddled under a tree in Fayette County. There were not many tornado incidents in the tri-state during 1990, but an active night on July 22nd saw damage occur in Lawrence and Butler counties. The big weather question of the year was what happened to summer. The mercury went to 90 or above in Pittsburgh just 3 times, as May, July, August, and September all averaged below par on temperature, leaving the global warming advocates scratching their heads. All things considered, the Pittsburgh area came through relatively unscathed by the elements, when you remember the massive severe weather outbreak in the Midwest, producing dozens of tornadoes in June, leaving scenes like this in Indiana. The widespread flooding from spring rains in Texas, Arkansas, and Louisiana. The floods that devastated Georgia and the Carolinas as a result of tropical storms Klaus and Marco. Remember the record flooding recently in Washington State. And then there was the great fog disaster that left 15 dead on a highway near Calhoun, Tennessee during December. So by most yardsticks, the weather of 1990 in Pittsburgh comes out looking pretty good. Here's to 91. Dennis Bowman, Channel 11 News.
Well, let's hope 1991 passes without a disaster like Shadyside.
Right. Well, we'll take a look ahead to 1991 next.
We reviewed 1990. Now, what does 1991 have in store for us? We'll take a look ahead when this Channel 11 News special report continues.
We went to the fight capital of the world and asked the fans, who's the greatest heavyweight ever?
By far, it's Muhammad Ali.
Ripping punches, Muhammad Ali. The challenger goes down again.
Muhammad Ali.
Who's the heavyweight champion of the world?
Sports Illustrated presents Muhammad Ali, the video. See his pro debut, his fights with Liston, Foreman, Frazier, Spinks, and more. And the video is free with your paid subscription to SI.
Get it and find out who the greatest of all time is.
A short, jolting right to the jaw. Liston goes down.
The man, he jabbed, body danced.
He float like a butterfly and sting like a bee.
Keep the camera moving because I'm kind of fast.
A sharp right and fully goes down.
It brought back memories, things I'd seen and hadn't seen. All the fights, all the interviews. Muhammad Ali, he took them all on.
Not in this one, Bombino. God's former Joe Frazier.
Naming the round and all that, people thought that was a fluke.
He wanted to go to heaven, so I took him himself.
You don't see boxers like that anymore.
And George Foreman goes down. Foreman goes down like a tree struck by lightning.
And the Muhammad Ali video is free.
That video's free? Can't be. How can it be free?
It's free when you subscribe to Sports Illustrated. Save over 50% off the cover price.
Oh, I'd go for it in a heartbeat. It's something to look into.
You'll get 23 issues, including the baseball preview and the swimsuit issue for 3 monthly installments of only $9.89. Or you can pay by credit card, so call now.
One of the greatest magazines that's been around this country since day one. Kind of like Muhammad Ali, it gives you everything.
Come on, girl. We in Manila. This is Muhammad Ali at his very best. And it's unbelievable that Joe Frazier is still standing.
You relived great memories of the greatest champion ever.
To view the legend in the tape was fantastic.
People who never had seen Ali would love this tape.
Yes, I recommend it for anybody.
You can't walk away from this tape without being a Muhammad Ali fan.
I am the king of the world. Hold it. Hold it. You're not that rich. I'm a bad man.
Call our toll-free number now and get knockout savings on Sports Illustrated and get the Muhammad Ali video free.
I shook up the world.
We continue our Channel 11 News special report now by taking a look ahead to 1991.
1990 was an uncertain year for the economy. Will 1991 continue the trend? There are many factors to consider: employment, housing sales, spending, lending rates, just a few. Our Andy Gastmeyer has been talking to the experts in these fields and joins us with a look into what 1991 could mean.
I think it's going to be a difficult year for the American economy.
What Norm Robertson, Mellon Bank's chief economist, has to say about the nation as a whole is pretty much what we can expect for the Pittsburgh area in the coming year. And proof of that is offered by Bill Sariani, analyst for the State Department of Labor and Industry.
All in all, I think that we'll have slow growth in 1991, probably in the vicinity of around 1.5%.
A figure that pales in comparison with 1988's 2.7% job growth rate, which translated into 23,100 new jobs, and 1989's 2% rate, which saw an additional 17,700 jobs added to the area's workforce. But it is in keeping with the general employment decline registered through the first 10 months of this year, a fact which leads Stuart Hoffman, Pittsburgh National Bank's chief economist, to say,
I think that the Pittsburgh area will probably enter a recession in the first half of 1991 and come out fairly quickly.
That would be in sharp contrast to the recovery from the recession that tore the area apart in the early 80s, when demonstrations designed to focus attention on the plight of the unemployed often ended in arrests. But Pittsburgh today stands in sharp contrast to the Pittsburgh of nearly a decade ago. when heavy manufacturing, namely steel, all but dominated the area's economy. In 1972, for example, the industry employed 72,000, compared to 25,000, or roughly a third of that figure today. Most of those jobs have since been replaced by rapid growth in the service industry, which between 1988 and 1989 alone accounted for nearly 41,000 new jobs.
Over the last almost 7 years, we've added about 75,000 jobs.
And more jobs will be added to that figure because of projects like the Southern Expressway. The general rule of thumb is that every $1 million spent on a construction project brings with it about 75 jobs. The Southern Expressway, a $180 million project, is expected to create about 11,000 jobs between the time work began here last month and the scheduled completion of this project in October of 1992. The $640 million midfield terminal complex, scheduled for completion in the fall of 1992, is expected to take on another 1,700 workers this coming year, on top of the 1,700 or so officials say are already working there. Those are just a couple of the reasons why Mellon's chief economist is able to say,
I think employment in non-manufacturing might have another increase in Pittsburgh. I think it's going to be a small one. We're looking at somewhere between perhaps 5,000 and 10,000 jobs.
Much of what is in the forecast depends upon such things as better times for one of the area's largest employers, namely U.S. Air.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon.
You too. The willingness of consumers to open their pocketbooks. And the turn of events in the Middle East. It is believed, because it has a well-balanced, broadly diversified economy, that Pittsburgh is better prepared now than at any time since World War II to withstand the impact of an economic recession. And therefore, analysts feel any recession here would be relatively mild. Not a bad note on which to begin the new year. Andy Gassmeyer, Channel 11 News.
So that's the year in review.
Stay tuned now to WPXI TV for a complete report of today's events on Channel 11 News. For the entire Channel 11 News team, I'm Peggy Finnegan.
I'm David Johnson. Have a healthy and prosperous new year.
Level home on Armstrong Drive late last night, but things could have been even worse for the Francis Fedodian family. The story now from our Stu Emery.
It was just after 11:30 last night, the Fedodian family in bed, when without warning the explosion ripped through the house, turning it into rubble. At that point, the burning roof was on the foundation, with all 4 members of the family trapped inside.
And when I looked out my window, I saw that the house was just in shambles. And I saw Bob Thompson across the street. I saw him running out in a pair of shorts, and I ran out in my shorts.
Good evening. For almost 25 years, CBS broadcast a show live every Sunday night that showcased the greatest talents in television history. It was the one, the only, Ed Sullivan Show.
And now, live from New York, 3, 2, 1. Now we got a real big show. Here's an amazing act. Now, ladies and gentlemen, here's a tremendous act.
I could have danced all night.
And look at people say he never laughs.
It's my party and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to.
Oh, beautiful for smoggy skies, insecticided grain.
And now here is Elvis Presley, the Beatles, Judy Garland, Barbara Streisand, the Muppets, the Rolling Stones, Carol Burnett, Louis Satchmo Armstrong, the Beach Boys, Sammy Davis Jr., Ella Fitzgerald, Flip Wilson, Red Skelton, Pearl Davis, Will Jordan, the Jackson 5, Jackie Gleason, James Brown, Joan Rivers, Jackie Mason, Jimmy Durante, Janis Joplin, and Topo Gigio. Oh, come on, come on. 1, 2, 3, 4.
Tonight we'll be hearing from our guest stars